Good morning, guys. It is the first garden tour of 2022 and it actually feels like winter out here, which is actually very sudden because on New Year's Eve I was outside in a skirt and I wasn't cold. It must have been like 70 degrees outside, and now we have frost on the ground and it looks like the next week is gonna have actual like right about freezing temperatures, so it's starting to feel like it's actually winter now. For those of you tuning in at the start of the 2022 Garden Tours playlist, I am Rachel and this is Auxhart Gardening. I started this garden behind me back in May, at the very end of May in 2021, and I've been doing almost weekly garden tours ever since. So if you're interested in seeing how all of this came to be, you might want to go back a whole playlist to 2021. But this year is gonna be hopefully even better than last year because I've learned a lot. On this channel, I don't want to show you, oh, look at this beautiful, perfect garden. I want to show you, look at this real garden that I am working on and learning from and improving from year to year. I like to share that with you guys because I know how disheartening it can be to look at this, oh, beautiful garden, and then look at your own and be like, well, I suck at gardening. No, you don't. These people are just showing you the pretty stuff and they're not showing you the hundreds of plants that they've killed over the years. So, with all that being said, let's get into today's tour. You can still see the frost on the ground, proving to me that it did actually get about to freezing last night. Fun fact, frost on the ground doesn't always mean that it went below freezing. It could just mean that that little layer of air right next to the ground got to freezing. It doesn't mean that the air temperature all the way up got to freezing. Alright, so let's start out where we always do, at this big long trellis. Along this trellis are the fava beans, and then right in the center here I have planted onion starts. Now the fava beans and the onion starts and basically everything else in the garden got off to a bit of a slow start. I think I didn't really understand when I needed to start things in order to have a fall harvest. So I am a bit behind on everything, and most things actually look pretty good because of this warm spell that we've had. They had a little bit of chance to grow a little quicker, but now that it's cooled off, I think we can expect more normal-ish winter growth from these guys. And I know they look a little sad and flopped over right now, but fava beans are good up to, I think, 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and it almost never gets that cold here. So I'm not really worried about it. I think they will perk up as soon as the frost melts off of them. Check out how cute and frosty these little underground houses are. I'm not sure if this is wasps or ground nesting bees. I think it might be ground nesting wasps, but I'm not concerned about it. I didn't run into an aggressive wasp, not even once, in my garden this year. And a lot of people mistake wasps for very aggressive, mean little pests, and they are pollinators just as well as the bees. So it would be good for your garden if you could learn to live with them. Oh, and if you want to learn more about pollinators, I did recently make a video about helping your pollinators over winter. So if you want more bees and butterflies in your garden, go check out that video. It's been a couple weeks since you guys saw the garden, and I think the spinaches definitely look bigger. They probably look bigger on camera, actually. This is my hand. They're not huge. But I've got my little lettuces, and I think if we keep going down this row, here's some more lettuces, and then I have a couple of kohlrabi here, which I've never grown before. But I had once in a crop share and I thought it was cool. I also have some of the random radishes that I planted. These are French breakfast. And I think, oh, look at that. That is an icicle radish. Icicle radish. I think some of those might be about ready to pull. Well, it's tiny, but it's a radish. Perfectly edible. I think I'm going to be seeing a lot of these around the garden this tour. Alright, so there's something else I want to try and show you guys while we're over here. Oh, Draco just going for it. This one is Cada, if you've never met them. Hard to tell apart on camera. So I've had trouble last year with, like, over in this area. When I moved in, there was a bit of a chasm. No, chasm is too strong a word. A bit of a little crevice that had been dug out by the water and was running down this way. And so I mulched this area, put some stones, and I kind of didn't have any problems with it until 2 nights ago. We had this huge storm. It woke me up at 5 in the morning with the wind and the rain, and I pulled out my radar app, and it was like literally spinning as if like a hurricane had come inland, and I couldn't find any evidence that it was in fact like a small hurricane or a tropical storm or anything like that, but it was definitely spinning. And there was lots of rain. I think if we go look at my rain gauge, it'll be completely full. And so there was a massive amount of water pouring through the garden, probably for the first time since I built it in May. And so if you look, you can kind of see that a couple of crevices were dug into the garden. You can see here all of this mulch got washed down and kind of into the sidewalk, and we can follow this crevice up this way, and there's another one if we come around here that went in front of my onions. You can see it completely unburied, that one. And so originally when I had first seen the first crevice, I thought, well, maybe I need to dig some swales to help redirect the water. And then I did the mulching and I decided swale is too much work, it'll be fine. Turns out swales are probably not optional in this garden if I want it to survive, specifically the March storms around here. I don't know if you were following me a couple years ago. Maybe, was it even just last year? I'll have to find out. A storm came through in March and knocked a tree down that hit my fence and my neighbor's house. And so we definitely do get big storms in this area with lots of rain, and I think I'm gonna have to prepare the garden for that. So I'm thinking of digging at least 2, maybe 3, essentially trenches that will act as swales across the garden. And if any of you have better ideas of what to do to manage the drainage, like, feel free. But seeing as I'm on rented property, I won't be able to put in like anything super intense. The fact that I'm able to garden here is really quite lucky, and the landlord knows that if I was to move out, this would grow back into lawn pretty quickly. So I was talking about how warm it had gotten here. This is a cilantro plant that I have had, and this is what the leaves should normally look like, and this is what it starts looking like when it's trying to go to seed. And I think I'm probably going to have to chop off the tops of all of these to keep it from continuing to go to seed, because now it's a little bit cooler. But that's just like a gauge of how warm for how long it was that this plant decided, oh, it's time to go to seed in the middle of December. Alrighty, so here I have 2 rows of brassicas, and I didn't intend for this to be a teaching experience, but it is kind of a perfect side-by-side comparison. The starts that went in both of these rows were planted at the same time, but these ones were put in the ground a few weeks before these ones. And so these ones have stayed small basically this whole time. Well, these ones have been getting bigger and bigger like they should, although they're not as big as I think they should be at this time of year. They are just simply bigger than these ones. Additionally, in between the rows, I have garlic and onions over there that are kind of interplanted, so that if you look at it from the side here, you can see that this cabbage has plenty of room, and this cabbage has plenty of room, and this space where I was thinking they were getting like this big, we'll see if that happens. And so the garlic has its space and these have their space, and when these come out I can put something else in that space, because garlic is going to be here until like June or July. One of the next videos I'm planning on doing for you guys is garden planning. So I'm going to talk about how to think about the interplanting stuff that I just mentioned, and show you my thought process, not just for planning the spring garden coming up, but the summer garden coming up, because I'm going to plan them at the same time. This one looks a little sad, but I promise it looks sad because of all the wind that blew it over the other day and not because of the frost. So plants that are frost hardy actually have the ability to store extra sugar in their leaves, which lowers the freezing point of the water in their cells and makes it so that their cells don't burst and expand by getting frozen, therefore killing the plant. I also have a video on that if you want to hear the whole story about plants that can survive freezing temperatures, but I think this is fine. I think it will perk back up in a few days because it was already a little leggy here, and I think it was balanced upright, and then the wind just simply blew it right over. If we go a couple down the road to where the sun is hitting it, you can see the frost is already melting off. And this I saw the other day, which is actually pretty exciting. This is my first broccoli floret, and I hope it gets bigger, but I mean, from here until it gets all the way as big as it's gonna get, it is gonna be technically edible. At this point, it's just a matter of maximizing the harvest. So coming back to the front of the next section where my trellises are. So I have peas on the outside of this trellis and onions on the inside. And the peas have been famously slow, but as you can see, they are actually starting to get a little bigger. Again, this warm spell was really quite good for them. And you know, who knows? They might survive the winter and then give me peas in the early spring. Here's that rain gauge, by the way. It was probably filled all the way to the top and then spilling over at some point. I could check the weather for how much rain we actually got, but that's a lot. Here's kind of my main root veggie section. On the right is turnips, and then carrots in the middle, and rutabagas on the left, and there are a few beets mixed in there, but only a couple. And I think the carrot section looks more lush than it truly is because there's a bunch of weeds growing in there. However, there are some carrots in here that are growing, and I might eventually get to harvest. But my germination with carrots was pretty bad, and that's something I'm still definitely learning about. Turnips though. Turnips are doing great. I think some of them are getting close to ready. Let's see. I could probably pull this one. Look at that. So these turnips are planted a bit close together. And I should have come through and thinned them, but I did not. And so now if I'm pulling some of them that are really close together, even if they're a little small, it should give room for the other ones around them to grow a little bit bigger. As always, this last row of brassicas is the best looking. I've got my Brussels sprouts and my cauliflower. These ones are only doing okay because I got them as starts from the botanical garden, from people who knew what they were doing and actually started them on time. And then interplanted, I also have some garlic. This is a different variety than the other row, but essentially the same as far as growing conditions. And these also look very blown over from the wind the other night. Seems like it was coming this direction, but I think that they'll be okay. They've got good strong roots and they don't look like they were pulled up at all. Now I want to take you down to the end and show you I found something that is kind of exciting. check out this one right here. Look at that. Those are baby Brussels sprouts. What do you think of the baby Brussels sprouts, Draco? Much less interesting than the birds, huh? So I do think normally a Brussels sprout plant should be much larger than this when it's starting to make its first sprouts. However, I will take what I can get, seeing as I messed up so much with the timing on this fall garden. I'm just walking back over this, noticing how bad the ground is in this area too. You can see all the little crevices dug by the water. Not good, not good. I'm not even sure what I'm going to do short-term fix for this. I might just wait till I was going to remulch anyway, and then kind of spot by spot as I'm pulling weeds, kind of redistribute the mulch. By the way, interesting to note, I never got around to doing anything with the sprouts that I didn't use. And so they have sat here in these containers and they have stayed small, which is another good illustration of how much the space a plant's roots have can affect how well it grows. So usually I come over here and say, oh, everything looks about the same. Everything does not look the same. Look, my cilantros are growing. They are very slow. But eventually they will happen. Everything else looks about the same. I don't know. It's hard to tell because I look at it a lot more often than you guys do. The parsley might be a bit bushier. The onions are starting to grow fresh new little leaves. But all in all, these herbs aren't really meant to grow much over the winter, except for the cilantro, which does great in the cold. What are you guys doing? I just saw Draco like running out of the corner of my eye. Alright, and because it's been a while, we'll take a quick detour to the berry patch, which I can confidently say looks about the same. Everything is dormant and should not be growing over the winter. So if it started growing because of our warm spell, I think that might actually be concerning. Yeah, I don't think you can see too much on camera right now. You can see a little bit of these raspberry bushes here at the end. Their foliage never turned a color. It's looked like this all winter, which I think is very interesting. Alrighty guys, this concludes our first garden tour of 2022. I hope to see you back here all year to keep up with how the garden does as I get better at gardening and then teach you how to get better at gardening. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, I wish you happy gardening.